was a dark and stormy night. A group of friends had gone camping in the woods, despite the weather. They huddled around a campfire, trying to stay warm and dry. One of the friends, named Sarah, suggested they tell scary stories to pass the time. The first story was about a ghost that haunted a nearby lake. The second story was about a serial killer who preyed on campers in the woods. The third story was about a witch who cursed anyone who disturbed her resting place. As they told these stories, the fire burned brighter and brighter. The friends didn't think much of it, assuming it was just the wood they had used. But then, they heard a voice coming from the fire. It whispered their names, one by one. The friends were terrified and ran away from the campfire. But the voice followed them, getting louder and louder. They stumbled through the woods, trying to find their way back to their cars. After what felt like hours, they finally emerged from the woods. They were exhausted, but relieved to be out of the woods. However, when they looked back, they saw that the campfire was still burning, even though they had left it behind. The friends never returned to the woods again. They were too scared to even talk about what had happened that night. But whenever they heard a crackling fire, they couldn't help but wonder if the voice would come back.
There was a group of friends who went camping in the woods. They set up their tents and started a campfire. As they sat around the fire, they heard strange noises coming from the darkness. They tried to ignore it, thinking it was just the wind. But the noises continued, getting louder and more frequent. Suddenly, they heard footsteps approaching them. They shone their flashlights in the direction of the footsteps, but couldn't see anything. The footsteps got closer and closer until they could hear someone breathing. The friends were too scared to move. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the darkness. It was a man, wearing a tattered cloak and carrying a lantern. The man approached the campfire and sat down with the friends. He didn't say anything, but just stared at the fire. The friends tried to make conversation with him, but he didn't respond. After a while, the man got up and walked back into the darkness. The friends didn't see him again that night. But the next morning, they found a note on the ground where the man had been sitting. The note read, "Beware the ghost of the woods. He seeks revenge on those who enter his domain." The friends were terrified and packed up their campsite as quickly as they could. They never returned to the woods again. Years later, a group of hikers stumbled upon the same campsite. They found a tattered cloak and a lantern lying on the ground. The hikers didn't see anything strange that night, but they heard strange noises coming from the darkness.
A group of kids were excited to start their summer camp adventure. They had been looking forward to it for months and couldn't wait to make new friends and have fun. The camp was located in the middle of the woods, surrounded by tall trees and a crystal clear lake. The kids were split into groups and assigned tents to sleep in. The first few days of camp were a blast. The kids went on hikes, learned survival skills, and even had a talent show. But then, strange things started to happen. One night, the kids were awakened by a loud noise outside their tents. They heard footsteps and whispers, but when they looked outside, no one was there. They assumed it was just another camper playing a prank. But then, things got even weirder. The kids started to see strange figures in the woods. They looked like people, but they were covered in mud and leaves. The figures would stare at the kids for hours, never moving or speaking. The kids were terrified and begged their counselors to do something. But the counselors didn't believe them. They thought the kids were just imagining things and told them to go back to sleep. One night, one of the kids woke up to find that his tent had been unzipped from the outside. He saw one of the figures standing just a few feet away. The figure was holding a knife and staring at him with cold, dead eyes. The kid screamed and woke up the other campers. They all ran outside and saw the figures standing in a circle, holding hands. The figures started to chant in a language the kids didn't understand. The counselors finally realized that something was seriously wrong. They called the police and tried to get the kids to safety. But the figures were too powerful. They surrounded the camp and wouldn't let anyone leave. The police arrived and tried to break through the barrier of figures, but they couldn't. The figures were too strong and too determined. The next morning, the police found the camp empty. The kids and counselors had disappeared without a trace. The only thing left behind was a note that read, "We'll be back next summer."